All right, so what we're doing, we're going to do things called unit conversions. Write that down. Unit. Actually, yeah, we'll call it unit conversions, yeah. Which means we're going to convert from one unit to the other. Okay, what are we talking about units? Well, we're talking about units as far as this. This says metric unit of length. So when we measure things in meters, in centimeters, in millimeters, in kilometers, those are all units. What are some other units that we use that maybe aren't metric as far as length concerned? Anybody know one? Come on, football players use it all the time. What do? You got to go 10 what? Yards. You got to go 10 yards, right? Okay, so yards. Give me some other ones. Come on now, talk to me. Miles is a good one. Somebody else. Feet. So give me another one. Inches, okay, and all that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about that in a second, but right now we're dealing with the metric unit of length. And probably some of you are saying, well, why do we deal with metric? Why do we deal with metric? We don't use metric. We use miles, we use feet, we use yards, and all that kind of stuff. I didn't do any real big research on this, but I think that we're probably the only country in this entire universe, in this world, that still basically primarily uses, that does not use the metric system. Has anybody ever been to another country?
Because it'd be weird playing football.
Yeah, it'd be weird playing football. In Canada, they use a metric system. They still use yards. But you know in Canadian football, their football field's 110 yards, not 100. So their middle line is not the 50-yard line. It's what? So the 55-yard line. Isn't that weird? And their end zone, how wide is our end zone? Or not wide, but how deep is our end zone here? It's 10 yards, okay? In Canadian football, I believe, I'm not positive about this, I think it might be 20 yards. So, I mean, they can do a lot of stuff. They scored a little bit more touchdowns because they got a lot more room to run around in the end zone and get touchdowns. So, but anyway, they use yards in Canada in football, but if you go out on the streets and you look at your speed limit signs, it's not in miles per hour. Guess what it's in? In kilometers per hour, okay? You go anywhere else. The guys from the Virgin Islands, they're from the British Virgin Islands. You know those guys, right? And they have everything is in metric over there. I have a new student. He's originally from Kenya. He said everything's in metric. Okay, so you go to other countries. I lived in Australia. That's why I have some Australia stuff over there. Because when I was a kid, I lived in Australia for 2 years. My dad was a teacher, and he applied for this special teaching fellowship thing, and he was able to teach in Australia for 2 years. So look at this. Look at the signs. Koalas next what? 10. What's the km? Kilometers. Okay. Some people say kilometers, but we usually shorten it to say kilometers. But you can say kilometers. It's not. He's not wrong. You don't have to laugh at him for that. People say kilometers, and there's no problem with that. I usually say kilometers. It just kind of flows a little bit nicer. Okay. But that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with metric. We're probably the only country. Probably the only country that still primarily uses the other system. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but let's just deal with metric. Again, metric is so much easier too. I don't know why we struggle sometimes with metric system, because it's so much easier, and it's such a better way to do things. But anyway, let's do this. We're talking about unit conversions. Let's just backtrack a little bit. Let's do a little history here. If I said, what's 3 over 3? What's 3 over 3 equal to? 1. Okay, what's like 1.54 divided by 1.54. What's that equal to? It's 1, isn't it? Okay, you took algebra last year, didn't you? What is x over x equal to? Come on, follow the pattern. So, something over itself, right? Something over itself is what? 1 and 1. This is something over itself. This could represent any number, right? So what is it? It's not x, it's 1. Because if it was x, you'd be telling me 3 over 3 is what? 3, is it? No, it's a 1. Okay, 3 over 3 is 1. This over this is 1. This over this is 1. What about this? Now I'll really fool you. What about centimeters over centimeters? What's that equal to? It's 1. It's just the number 1. It's not 1 centimeter. It's not 1 meter. It's not 1 yard. Okay, it's not 1x. It's just what? Talk to me. It's 1. Okay, it's the number 1. You follow me on that? Anything divided by itself is equal to what? 1. Good. You got it. That's what a unit is. Oops. I forgot to change this thing. I got to change that so it doesn't fill in. Okay, now I can draw a circle. There we go. This thing right here, this word unit basically means 1. I don't know. You guys are probably too young. You remember Randy Johnson? He was a pitcher. in the major leagues. Okay, he's got a commercial out. Everybody probably knows the commercial where he's having the snowball. It's a Geico commercial where he says, you know, the snowball, and he wings the guy, and then he bashes the garage door open. That's Randy Johnson. He was a great pitcher. They called him the big unit because he was like the number one guy. He was number one. He was the guy, the number one guy. That's how I can remember. Well, it's not how I remember, but that's one way you can think of it, okay? The big unit, or one. Unit means one. What we're going to do is we're going to convert from one thing to another, and we're going to use these things called unit multipliers. If you want to write that down, you can. Unit multipliers to do these conversions. We're going to convert from one thing to the other. Now, I said all this stuff was equal to 1. Well, what's anything, any number at all, times 1 equal to? Like 7 times 1. What's 7 times 1? What's 57 times 1? What's 1,438 times 1? Okay, you got the idea, right? Anytime you multiply something by 1, does it change the value of it? No, it doesn't. Okay, so that's what we're going to do right here. We're going to actually multiply by things that are 1. Look at this. 1 kilometer or kilometer, however you want to say it, doesn't make any difference. Either one is right. 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters. They're equal to each other. So if I did this, if I put 1 kilometer over 1,000 meters, they're equal to each other, right? They're the same thing. 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. What's anything divided by itself equal to? It's equal to 1, isn't it? You follow me on this? Okay, that's why I went through this stuff. Anything divided by itself is equal to 1. So that means I can multiply anything, oh, I'm off the pad here. No wonder it wasn't writing. I can multiply anything by this, and it still stays the same. That's called a unit multiplier. If I multiply something by 1, it really doesn't change the value of it. And you're saying, well, how does this help us do this unit conversions? Well, I'm glad you asked, because we're going to do one. Let's do this one. 4.2. This is what the problem's going to look like. Okay, and I'm going to hand you a worksheet when we're all finished here, and that's what you're going to do for homework tonight. Whoops, I'm not going to do the equals. 4.2 kilometers. Excuse my writing. I still got to get used to writing on this pad. This is a new pad, and it's a little bit different than writing. It's weird to get used to not seeing what you're writing on, you know, looking somewhere else. So it's a little bit odd, but I'm getting better at it as time goes on. So anyway, 4.2 kilometers equals, and then this is how they write it. They put a little question mark or a blank, and then meters right here. Now you might be able to just do this in your head, and that's fine. Okay, but what I want to do is I want to set up a certain way to do it, so we do it the same way every single time. And I understand some of you can just look at this and give me what the answer is. But I want to go through a series of steps and show you what we're going to do, because sometimes they're more complicated than this. We start off easy and we work our way up to a little bit harder. By the way, keep your eye on that. When it gets close to 15, let me know, okay, in case I forget, because I need to stop it at 15 minutes. This is the first thing that we do. All right, first thing that we do is we rewrite what we're starting with, what we're trying to convert. We're trying to take 4.2 kilometers and convert it. Let's think about this for a second. Let me take a pit stop here. Okay, and this is right here. Let's show it like this. This is 1 meter. This is exactly 1 meter. It's not a yardstick because it's not a yard. A yard is how many inches? 36 inches. Okay, so that's a yard right there. Do you see the difference between a yard and a meter? You guys paying attention? All right, let's put that away. We don't need that. We're not using it. There you go. Okay, look at this. This is a yard from this end to where my finger is over here. That's 1 yard, right? You know, you've heard people talk about things in meters and yards. So a meter is only about that much more than a yard. Approximately 3 inches, 3 and a little bit more than a meter. Or I'm sorry. It takes that much more to get a meter than a yard. Okay, you follow me? So that's a meter right there. What's a kilometer? What do we measure with kilometers? Do we measure short distances or long distances or medium distances? What do you think? Long distances, right? Because when you go down a road, look, the next 10 kilometers, is that like the next 10 steps? No, of course not. That's like down the road. People think, well, it's close to a mile. It's not really that close to a mile. It's actually a little bit more than half a mile. I think it's around 6/10 of a mile. It's not exactly 6/10, but it's around that. About 6/10 of a mile. It's a little bit more than half a mile is a kilometer. So if I'm converting from kilometers to meters, am I going to have just a handful of meters, or am I going to have a whole bunch of meters? A whole bunch of meters, right? Because I need a whole bunch of these to get 4.2 kilometers. 4.2 kilometers is a long way, all right? So it's a little more. What? Half of 4.2 is what? 2.1. So a little bit more than that would be, I don't know, I'm just guessing, around 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, somewhere around there, miles. Okay, so that's how long it is. So it takes a lot of those meter sticks to get that long. Okay, make sure that when you're doing these things that you are you're understanding that your answers make sense. If your answer was like 0.004 meters, would that make any sense? Is 0.0042, I mean, that's a small number. That's a little bit of a meter. There's no way that's going to equal 4.2 kilometers, is it? All right? Make sure you look at your answers and make sure it makes sense to you, okay, when you do that. All right? You with me? All right. I'm going to always put this over 1 because what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply it by a fraction. So I want the first one to look like a fraction. Everybody with me? It's the first thing you do. Now watch what I'm going to do. I've got kilometers up here. I want to get rid of the kilometers and I want to change it to meters. So if kilometers is up here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put kilometers down here so that when I multiply them, guess what they do? What do we say in math? Though? They cancel out, right? Okay, so they cancel each other out. Everybody see that? So whatever is the top one here, we put on the bottom in order to cancel out. But now we want to put something up here. What do we know? We know a conversion here, don't we? We know how many meters and how many kilometers. So what I'm going to do is change this to meters. So how many meters equals how many kilometers? Yep, you got it. 1,000 meters equals what? 1 kilometer. You got it? Look what happens. The kilometers cancel each other out. Now what do? We're left with meters. What do we do to those two numbers? Just multiply them together, okay? So if you're multiplying by 1,000, which is 3 zeros, we take that decimal and move it 3 places to the right, which actually gives us how many zeros? 2 zeros. So it's 4,200 meters. Now again, you could have done that in your head, a lot of you, but I want you to go through this process. When you do the homework, I want to see all this stuff. See all that stuff I put in a box right there? That's what I want to see when you do the homeworks. You got it? I don't want this is not the way you want to do it. I don't want to put number 1, 4,200 meters, and then go on to number 2. I don't want to see that. I want to see the work. Write down the problem. Even write down this thing right here. Oops, keep writing off the edge of this. Even write down this thing right here. Okay, the problem itself, show your work, show your answer, and what did I do to the answer? I circled the answer. Okay, that's how I want to see it on your homework assignments. You got that? All right.